Hey, Dan Shafer, the editor-creator of the Recombobulation area in Wisconsin, joins us. Dan, I want you to meet Elizabeth Laidlaw. She's a fellow SAG member with me. We're both strike captains during that strike. And Dan Shafer is one of the most talented voices in progressive journalism, both print and radio. He's the political editor for Civic Media. So hi, Dan. How are you doing today?
Hi, Patty. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, as always.
Absolutely. You heard Dave we were talking about, a progressive radio, or at least non-conservative talk. How many stations does Civic Media have in Wisconsin?
We now have 20 stations across the state of Wisconsin. So really building up quite the network. And then, of course, added the Recombobulation area a couple months ago as well to bolster some of our digital operations and all of that. Relevant to the conversation you guys were just having, I really think the media landscape is in such a kind of problematic place right now for left of center media and projects like what we're working on at Civic Media and the Recombobulation area in Wisconsin. I think is going to be a really important part of the media landscape going forward and starting local and building from the ground up, not necessarily, just throwing the big dollars at the top down, but really, changing the way media works from the ground up too.
Yeah, I don't know. Was that necessarily do you know if that was the intention of Civic Media? Because I know that I had spoken to somebody earlier, I think last year, who had come in and was going to be working on some of the programming, and they told me they were looking for people that did more, lifestyle stuff, like movies and having interviews and things like that. Is it kind of a mix of both? Would you say?
It is, yeah. We have a number of traditional like FM dial radio stations that are part of the network too. But our talk stations, our news talk stations, we have all over the state. Those broadcast are kind of left of center media talk radio media shows that run from there's shows from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. that are political shows. So. Lots of opportunities that we have in Wisconsin to have those conversations. And, hey, maybe that's part of why Wisconsin voted to the left of Michigan and Pennsylvania this year. Maybe we have a little bit stronger infrastructure in the state. Obviously, would have liked a little bit further to the left at the end of the day there. But, it's one step at a time, right?
Yeah. You also have the amazing Ben Wickler, who's your Wisconsin, DNC chair, who's just was such an incredible organizer. I wish we could, make a mold of him and reprint him for all the states. He's just an incredible guy. I've been listening to a lot of the big voices and and left of center political media talking about how we struggled to reach so many people so many people who ended up voting for Trump, or more importantly, not voting at all. I mean, we have to bear in mind, only 22% of the population even showed up to the polls. So Trump wasn't elected by half the country. Trump was elected by a little bit more than half the people who even showed up. But trying to reach these people is going to be such a challenge. And I think they've been in front of this. It's obvious that if you have, a company like Fox, they don't scruple. They're perfectly happy to sell out. The money is the bottom line. Progress is not the bottom line for them. Making things better for ordinary people is not the bottom line for them. So they have the big corporations on their side. They have, the moneyed interests on their side. And the progressive voices are always going to be at least at something of a financial disadvantage, unless, of course, a couple of billionaires who are on this side of the table, invest in and find a way to make progressive radio popular and interesting, or find a way to make it not popular. I mean, it's popular for us, but to make it something that people can want to invest in and is going to draw money and is going to draw attention and is going to draw, that's our big challenge,
Yeah, and I think another part of that challenge is that the left of center media, you're holding yourself to a different standard than right-wing media too, because right-wing media can just say whatever they want and are just completely shameless about bending the truth or just outright lying about things. And I just don't think that people on the other side of the aisle don't really. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard with those things. And I don't think people on the left can get away with a lot of the stuff that people on the right, that has just become baked into how the right-wing media ecosystem operates. So I think that is certainly a big part of the challenge there too. Just having shame. Having shame. Any kind of shame.
But because we don't turn to trying to manipulate and harness rage and hatred, right? Because what would that look like? Because I was just talking about this in the last half hour. They point the finger, and it's the people of color that it's their fault. They're violent. They're the ones taking your jobs and taking spots from your kids in college. It's migrants, doing these, diminishing your community, all putting a strain on finances and pitting those communities against each other all over the place. But here's the thing. They're like, it's their fault your life isn't better. But the truth is, it's conservatives' fault. Like,
it is.
Quantifiably their fault.
We have to stop. We are like, generally speaking, the nicer party.
Yes.
That's just our personality. We are the nicer party. We are the party of inclusion. Kamala on the campaign trail was out there talking about how, it's a big tent. There's room for everybody here. Come on in. And the country's angry and feeling put upon and, looking for somebody to blame. They don't want to come to a party and hang out in a big tent with everybody. They want to be mad.
Yes.
And we have to try to reach them and if they want to be mad, because I'm mad, I'm really mad.
Yeah.
But I feel like I know where to point my anger.
Conservatives. Legit. I'm sorry. Dan, how do we get people to, seriously, why does that message not get across? Whether it's housing or healthcare, the cost of college. We can trace that to Reagan, directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it is, like you said, it is a lot of these kind of like moneyed interests that are, propping up the right-wing, media ecosystem in a lot of ways. But I think one thing too is that there is, I forget exactly where this was from, but there was a study put out over the last couple of weeks that just showed if you are a more engaged voter, if you are, listening to the radio, if you're reading, print media, if you're following the news regularly, you are far more likely to vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. You were far more likely to vote for Kamala Harris. I think it was like a 15% margin, which is huge. And so I think it is a lot of people who are not paying attention to the day-to-day news environment who gravitated towards Trump in this particular election. Now, whether that translates to Republicans in midterm elections or Republicans who are not Trump, I think that remains to be seen. I think that's going to be a big question for Republicans to grapple with in the coming years. But people who are not engaged day to day in what's happening in the news are just far more likely to only turn out for Trump. And I think we saw that sometimes with some of the Senate races, like here in Wisconsin, Donald Trump won here, but Tammy Baldwin, the Democratic senator, also won here. You saw that in a number of states. So I wonder how specific to Trump that issue is. And I do wonder if he's able to kind of tap into this reservoir of people who might not otherwise vote. I've been, having conversations about this over the past couple of weeks following the election. The way I've been characterizing this group is kind of the pro wrestling Republicans. I was at the RNC and Hulk Hogan was there, and you had Kid Rock performing, and like all of these different people. And I think that kind of brings a certain voter out of the woodwork to maybe only show up and vote for Trump, and maybe not really pay that much attention to what else is happening up and down the ballot too.
Yeah, and I think, this is another conversation that I've both been having with my close friends, and I've been listening to out there in the ecosystem, is that we are sort of skating on the thin ice of turning into the party of scolds. I mean, with Trump taking all of those yahoos to that game. What did he? Was it a basketball game or I don't know? He took them all. They were all at some game or something, and they made.
No, it's like a UFC fight.
Yeah, the UFC
weekend.
fight. That's right. The UFC fight. Yeah, they took a whole bunch of them, and they're all there, and they made Robert F. Kennedy eat a Big Mac, and they're like
right.
And that it looked fun. And I think when we're living in this culture right now where this emulation does, this desire to emulate people who are more famous and more out there, they are starting to look like the fun ones. And so I think the other part of turning the leftist media ecosystem, even though what we try to do, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, progressivism is a slog. It's hard work. We recognize that it's so difficult to, government is hard. It moves slowly. It is we are just now starting to enjoy the benefits of a lot of the things that Biden did over the last 4 years. And, because it moves so slowly, Trump's probably going to be able to ride on those coattails and pretend it was him. But we have to, I feel like the media ecosystem, if it's going to succeed, is we have to be the fun ones. We have to be the fun people again. We have to be.
Some of us can be.
Yeah. We have to have a message that is both moving forward and trying to rebuild our society, as a more equal playing field, but also not be the media scolds, and the people wagging our fingers in people's faces and saying, you're wrong all the time, because that's not going to get us anywhere.
Right. It's not fun to vote for your boss. It's not fun to vote for your professor.
Yeah. Or your mom.
Or something like that, right? Yeah. So,
eat your spinach before you go to bed and vote for Democrats.
Too. I think there's some of the comedy on the left, I think, has gotten a little bit too self-serious at times as well.
Yeah.
And I think you got to get back to having a little bit more of a sense of humor. Maybe I'm thinking about that because I'm seeing Jon Stewart in Milwaukee tonight.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
How much fun.
Yeah, very excited.
I'm curious. I want to know how it goes, but we'll talk about him next week. I do want to know. Elizabeth mentioned Ben Wickler, so he is in the mix. They're thinking about having him chair the Democratic Party, the DNC, and oddly, the other person they're considering, the only other name I've heard is Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, that's. Speaking of being the party of scolds, I don't think Rahm is he's a yeller. He's.
How much time do you have, Dan? Because I can tell you the story on the air if you'd like. Do you have time? If you do,
I got a few minutes.
Okay, so just real quick. So I just realized Dan and I talked last week, and I have a personal story about Mayor Rahm Emanuel, former mayor. So I used to have a segment on my show. It was on in the middle of the night, 11 to 2 a.m. and we were with a local media guy who was like, "Oh, I wake up to you," and my producer and I thought it would be a funny idea to be his wake up call. We would call him and wake him up at 10 to 2 in the morning, and it was Marcus Leshock, and he actually even played my voicemail. He didn't answer the first time, so they played my voicemail on TV and stuff. Yeah. So we did it for a couple months. All the local Tracy Butler, Annabelle Laval, Lord Thwart, all those folks, but we were in the middle of a budget impasse, and I was like, "How do it was on the Daily Show." So this works out perfectly for you. Yeah. Dan. On the Daily Show, they were interviewing one of our Democrats in the General Assembly and one of our Republicans, because we went 2.5 years without a budget in Illinois, and people suffered mightily. And the interviewer said, "How do you sleep at night?" to both of them. The Republican said, Sandak said, "I sleep fine." And Daniel Biss said, "It keeps me awake at night." And I'm like, I'm going to call these people. And I started calling legislators in the middle of the night. And I had a lot of their numbers. And the bit was people would give me the number of the next person they wanted me to call. And so I called Democrats, Republicans. I called the floor leader of the Democrats. I called the Republican majority. I even called the state treasurer. So I had all these numbers. And then one night, the station manager said, "Hey, you should have this activist on your show, Reverend on your show, Livingston." And he was a big rabble rouser. He's the one that shut down Lakeshore Drive for the Black Lives Matter marches and all those things. So he was in the studio, and I told him about the bit, and he goes, "Oh, you know whose number I have?" So I didn't even think about it, because I had asked the station. I said, "Are you sure it's okay? I'm doing this." And "Oh, we love it. We want to get you more." Stephanie Menendez said, she was our operations manager. She goes, "Oh, I'm going to get you more numbers. We love it." And I was like, "Great. I want the governor. I want the the Speaker of the House. I want the President of the Senate, and I want Mayor. I said it out loud. No one said, don't do that.
Right. How did Mayor Emanuel react?
Well, Dan, so the first time we called, so this tells you how badly it went, because the first time we called, he sounded like that, So none of us believed it was him.
Right.
And he hung up, right? And so the studio was full. Everyone's yelling, no, call him back. Let's see if you got the right number. Check the number on the Reverend's phone. So we call back. You guys, he was awake. And everybody in the studio, even though it was like everyone pushed away from their microphones, like I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And everyone was looking at the windows, like a car might roll up or something. And I said, "Hi, Mayor. This is Patti Vasquez calling from WGN Radio." And he goes, "Why are you calling me this late?" And I go, "'Cause this is when my show is on."
And we have questions.
we were actually calling about gun violence, and we thought we were. And he goes, "I'm going to hang up now," and he did. He hung up, and I thought we were going to go viral with this audio, because I've been doing it for months, and the station liked it. Oh boy, he wanted my head on a platter. He wanted me fired hard. But before I let you go, Dan, this is what I remembered after we talked last week. It wasn't that I have a problem with him being in charge of the Democratic Party again. The problem I have, and there's so many of them, and the reason I know I called him that night now is that I'm petty. He called Democrats who wouldn't step up effing R words. He used the derogatory term, and he did it multiple times. He was on Jay Leno's show and talked about how he did something. It's like when you applaud for the Special Olympic kid when he gets a strike in bowling. Yeah. I just realized after. That's why I want to tell you on the air that I remembered. That's why I'm pretty sure I called him that night. Yeah. Because So anyway, I don't want him to be the head of the Democrat. But,
I don't want.
And
Ben Wickler's so good. He's so good.
But Dan, do you want him? Do you want him to not be the head in Wisconsin?
Yeah. Well, so I wrote a longer piece about this week at the Recombobulation area. So if you want to know more about what's going on with all of this, I encourage you to check that out. But I think that is kind of the vibe from talking to a lot of Democratic sources around Wisconsin. We're saying that, this would be great. Ben would be perfect for the role. I had one person call him a Goldilocks candidate, saying he would be just right for everybody. Yeah. But they would miss him in Wisconsin. But at the same time, it's like his term is up in June. So there is a big, it's a state Supreme Court race in April. And from what people have told me, that Wickler really wants to see that through. But his term ends in June anyway, and there's no guarantees that he would stay beyond then. So I do think it is a really interesting potential option for him to seek this role as a DNC chair. And I think they told me that he is seriously considering it right now, that he's going to be making a decision within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So certainly something to watch here. In Wisconsin. I know the Minnesota Democratic Party chair announced earlier this week, Ken Martin. Martin O'Malley, the former Maryland governor, also announced this week. So I think there's going to be a number of candidates that jump into this, but I do think if Wickler does make the decision to run for this role, he certainly would be one of the top contenders, I would have to think.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, I've run out of time by telling you my story. So I want you to be able to go and enjoy yourself this evening because you deserve it, my friend.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
And go check out that piece on Ben Wickler if you're interested. That's the Recombobulation area just published yesterday.
So make sure you're subscribing to the Substack that Dan puts out and be a paid subscriber so you can continue to support the great work that he and the journalists he works with do. Thank you, Dan. Have fun.
Thanks so much. Be well.
You too.